Good morning and welcome to Or to Know Better. This is the Berardi and Coke version where we dissect and look at the meltdown from games gone by, namely the Arsenal one last night. How are you doing this morning, Gilly? You all right, man?
Yeah. Could be better based on the football, but could be worse.
Generally, life is treating you okay, I take it, yeah?
It'd be right.
Yeah, be right. Be grand. Be grand. It was an interesting game last night, Gilly, and what I'd kind of like to start with, which seems to be the one thing that's causing the biggest meltdown online, was the team selection. We know what Fark is like. We know he trusts people to a certain extent when he probably should do what's best for the team. What's your opinion on all that?
So I think in the build up to it, when we'd done the main pod last week, I think I was saying I'd quite like to see Premier League experience starting midfield, but I expect to see Gruev starting midfield, and that's what we saw. Ampadu himself, whoever came in, club captain, definite leader, somebody that's not going to rest on his laurels, is going to get stuck in, and just generally all round the leadership was always going to be a big miss. But for me, Gruev in the middle was the wrong choice. I think there were a lot of talk over Pirot and whether he was right to come in. I think we sacrifice a lot of goal threat if he's not on the pitch. But there were talk about the additional athleticism of Nmecha. And I think the only other real question mark is whether Struijk should start with BL being available after suspension. I think you could put a Rizzler paper through a lot of that, other than the Grave one for me. I think it's so close. Struijk played well against Everton. And for me, if a player plays well, taking him out doesn't send the right message. But it was always going to be a difficult one because you look at Arsenal's setup and you're thinking, Biel's a bit better at reading the game. Might not still not particularly quick, just like Struijk is, but a bit better at reading the game and a few. But I think it's really difficult. It's hindsight's 2020. It's really difficult to criticize for those bits. But for me, it was the Gruev one that was the big one.
Yeah, I think so. I said it on I can't even remember what day me and Jay and Danny were on. I think it was Thursday, was it?
It was Thursday night,
Wednesday,
yeah.
Wednesday or Thursday.
Danny,
yeah.
Dylan joined you.
Dylan, excuse me. Sorry, Dylan, if you're watching. Brain fart.
I want even on.
I should know his name because one of my best mates is Dylan. So that's my own fault. That's one of the. Pardon me. Jesus. That was one of the things I mentioned on the pod there last night, was that I kind of wanted Longstaff in instead of Gruev. Now it's no slight on Gruev. He knows how Fark wants to play. He knows everything else. But I think for those kind of games, we were very much lacking in Premier League experience in that midfield. And I thought Longstaff would have been the correct choice just because of the 180 odd games he's already played in the Premier League. And against opposition like Arsenal, he's played quite regularly over the years. So I thought in terms of selection, that was the biggest thing for me, was not starting Longstaff over Gruev. I liked what you mentioned about Struijk at the back. I think it does kind of take the cohesion out of a back line that's played pretty well against Everton. But personally, myself, I'd have preferred to have gone 3 at the back and have BL, Struijk, and Rodon in there, and have a 5 in midfield and a 2 up front, perhaps, or a false 9 somewhere thrown in or whatever. But definitely 5 in midfield, I felt was probably more applicable to try and smother their play through the centre of the park, which we saw happen quite a lot.
And I think on that, I disagree to a certain extent on that. I don't think much happened coming through the middle. I think it was on the flanks that they were most dangerous. If you look where the goals came from, it was either us making a mistake in Gruev just popping the ball up to to Declan Rice, who he's incredible, by the way. He was so good. I think I'm not equating the two players and their capabilities, but them not having Rice would be Arsenal does not have Ampadu. I think the loss of Ampadu is that big. But Rice is so good. He's so composed. He reads the game so well, and he's always in the right place at the right time. And Grave popped the ball up to him. 2 quick passes. They're in on goal and they've scored. And I think other than the things that we did to our team, didn't really do much damage to us through the centre. I think it was from the flanks. And I think you might be right, but I also remember Berardi, Woodgate and Ferdinand trying to be shoehorned into a team, and because how else do you get enough to start? And we got absolutely walloped off a Leicester side who were expected to beat. Now doing that against Arsenal, where if you've not trained for it, you've not prepared for it, we've not done it in any of the friendlies. I think it's a big ask to just get it right. So I think if you come off the back of a good performance against Everton and you rip up the model that you're trying to get the players to follow, I think there's a danger that it unravels very quickly, and we could have been, even with on the face of it, on paper, a more defensive-minded setup. I think that can unravel really quickly, and if you concede early on, your game plan's just totally gone. I think we needed to do some kind of carrying of a threat, and I think we were looking at Dan James and we were looking at Willie Gnonto, who I thought worked hard but didn't really weren't able to offer anything in attack, really. We didn't see any danger from them, and I think if you sacrifice one of them, because to follow through on what you're saying, if you've gone 5 at the back or 5 in midfield, 3 at the back, what you're effectively saying is you'll have either Gnonto or Dan James behind Pirot or Nemecha. I mean, because you can change the personnel, obviously, if you're changing the setup of the side. And I think you look at their centre-backs, and they are so good, so assured. It's not that the cloggers or anything, because the long balls that we were trying to do to Pirot, they weren't working, but they were never going to work against Oliva and Gabriel. But they're also fast, and they're also athletic. They're not just big that you can't beat in the air. They're very good. So if you're compressing the game and trying to move through the lines in the centre, I think Arsenal just eat that up. I think we had to try and carry some threat on the wings.
No, I do. I agree with what you're saying as well. When I said kind of stifle, a lot of it came through midfield. I meant as in a lot of the build-up before it went out wide, because it was literally they'd play it around between the 3 in midfield where we weren't getting near the ball. And then it was one pass out wide and it was literally in the box within another 2 or 3 touches, that kind of way. So what I meant by, kind of suffocating them in midfield was not giving them the time on the ball to be able to look for those wide passes. And what you say is correct as well. But I just felt that with the likes of Odegaard, Rice in midfield, we needed to get a lot closer to them to avoid any quick press balls out wide. And that's kind of what I meant by, playing 5 in midfield. If you've got 5 in midfield, you then stifle and you can get closer to their players. And that's kind of what I meant in that kind of sense. But your point is totally valid as well. But do you think it was kind of a short-sighted thing of Fark not to at least try 3 at the back with the centre-backs that we have? They're all good headers of the ball. And Biol has some of the best statistics in Serie A and possibly Europe for defensive clearances. Is that me gone pear-shaped there now, is it?
No, I can hear you.
No? All right, sound. And do you think it was a bit short-sighted of Fark not to at least try different defensive formations with the 3 lads that we could have potentially had at the back yesterday?
I think whatever happens, we were never likely to come away from the game with a positive result. it's such a massive golfing class stepping into the Premier League anyway. But then going up against one of the sides that are hoping to challenge for the title, the gap is so massive. I think on paper, it's fair to say, because they are three of our best defenders. So surely having three of our best defenders instead of two of our best defenders on the pitch is going to allow us to defend a bit better. But like I say, if that's not what they've been training at, it's really difficult then, because if it doesn't go right, then Farke comes under even more criticism. And I think that it's not just about one game in isolation either. If he's trying to build something and he's trying to get momentum, and we're trying to get a pattern, the patterns of play working right, if you then chop and change that too much based on the opposition, first off, are you giving them too much respect? We need to be in a position where we're trying to at least play our own game and trying to carry some threat. But equally, you then really struggle for an out ball. So if you've only got, let's say, Nonto and Pirro up front, how are you going to get that ball into them? Because through midfield, you can ask, if you've got one sitting, let's say Stack's sitting, which I think takes quite a bit away from his game, actually. But if he's the one that's sitting with Tanaka and Longstaff in front of them, then you're looking for them to play the balls into the channels. But to me, that seems like it would be even more easy to defend against us. So it would give you an opportunity to try and get closer to the ball, and let's face it, Rice and Odegaard especially, but Zubimendi as well. They all played well in there, but Odegaard's so good at dropping off the ball when he needs to, and Rice recognises as soon as that's happened and fills in the gap, and the dynamism and dynamics between them that they've got. They play really well together. So I think it's easy to look at the lineup and think, well, should we have done this? Should we have done that? I think the fullbacks that we've got are perfectly capable of playing as wing backs. It's just on paper that might be fine, but in reality, when you've not trained it, you've not set up for that. That would then be difficult. And anything like if in pre-season we've been building up to this game instead of the Everton one, or we'd been practicing against both, and we had been working on that back three. If then one of those centre backs is unavailable for any reason, then your game plan's totally gone, because who steps in at that point and covers that absence? So it's really difficult. I see where you're coming from, and I'm not saying there's no logic in the thought, but the practicalities of it make it quite difficult.
No, I get that, and. I think it's something that Farke is probably going to realise that he's going to have to do more work on potentially in the future to set up in different ways with the type of players that we have now at our disposal that can maybe disrupt teams a little bit more in certain areas. Just want to touch on something here. Deb made a good point, which I did notice a lot. At every set piece, their players congregate at the opposite side of the box from the ball and ran into the centre. I noticed that we were just lined up on the 18-yard box in a line, while there was 7-8 of their players, like Deb said, congregating on the back end of the box. And their first goal kind of came from that scenario, where if you've got players running from behind you, you're never going to know where they are. You're never going to know what position they're taking up when they're making those runs, because you're looking at where the ball is coming from rather than where the player is coming from. So maybe those are things that we can look at and potentially try and alleviate any of those mistakes again in the future, because you're on the back foot from the minute that ball is kicked, because you're wondering, where's I'm sure they know which players they're meant to be looking after. But if you don't know where that player is when they're running into the box, you're constantly on the back foot with your head turned, not looking at the ball. And it caught us out more than once yesterday. And I think that observation should be taken more seriously when we're looking to defend in that scenario, because it was very I'm not against positional defending, if you get me, but I just think when a team does what Arsenal did, I think you have to be good enough to sort of go, right, okay, we can't let them have another go at that, because that's clearly working for them. So let's alter. Like it's not a big thing to say, right, follow your man, go stick next to your man, follow him. Doesn't matter. Like, in those kind of scenarios, I think one or two left in the centre and the rest just hustling with the Arsenal players at the back of the box should be something we should look into.
Yeah, I think, they're very, very, very well drilled, and you can see that they work on their set pieces incredibly hard, because not only is the quality of delivery there, I mean, there's such, with the whip and the velocity of them, so hard to defend against anyway. Even if you're not set up in the middle particularly well, those deliveries are really difficult to defend against. I like having your best headers free in the box. So, like when I say that, if a side exists whose best header of a ball is a striker, I like them being somewhere in between the line of the keeper and the front post, about 5-6 yards out, because more often than not, they're going to be able to get the head to that and not defend. Your centre halves need to be picking up their strikers and their centre backs and whatever else. You need to match that up. And I think very, very early on, any game, at any level, amateur, wherever, you need to know who you're picking up at any given time in those set pieces. And I think when you've got them set up so that they're all congregated in a mass like that, it's very, very difficult to go man to man, and that's why they do it. So not only is there then a trigger for them to move into their places, and they all knew where they were going. It's not like they all just ran en masse together. They all knew exactly where they were going. But it's so difficult to get tight to a man like that when they're all congregated together. I think one thing that we need to do is when they end up with a man on the keeper, is our man needs to be goal side, because our keeper can just drag our own man around. It's not foul.
Yeah.
You can drive them. I don't know if you saw them playing against the Scum, but that's exactly how they scored against them. Is they just got a man in the way, and if your keeper can't get their hands to it, or they can't get through a throng of bodies, then pretty much you can set up however you need to be. And so I think there was a little bit of naivety in our defending, but you can't take away from it just how good the delivery and the setup and how well drilled they are at set pieces. I don't particularly like the zonal piece. I think you were talking about free kicks when you said they were lined up on the 18-yard box, but even the corners when they were lined up on the 6-yard box, you can see what they're doing, and it's telegraphing our defensive approach, which makes it eminently obvious to anybody how they can try and counteract that. But equally in attack, there were times when they had one person on the penalty spot for our corner, and nobody made a run to move that person away, that would have just left oceans of space. So I think there's an aspect of they're very, very well drilled in set pieces and we're not. And in defence and attack, I think you need that. We've seen before when you've got set piece coaches, we are signing a big side that's not going to be easy to bully, or at least that appears to be the intent. Now, we got played off the park yesterday. I don't think we got bullied. I don't think we were physically bullied necessarily. We just got outplayed. Just came up against a better side. But when it comes to Everton, Brentford, Burnley, Sunderland, the Wolves, those sides that we expect to be in and around us through the course of the season, those are the ones that we need to stand up and not be bullied by. And I think that in that sort of respect, any fine margin at all is huge in those games. So if you can get 0.5% or 1% by having set piece coaches and being well drilled at set pieces, especially when you've got a big side like we have, that's exactly what we should be doing and trying to take advantage of that.
Yeah. There's a lot of chat in the comments as well regarding the loss of Ampadu. He was huge loss yesterday. I think it just goes to show how important he actually is. If people kind of, he got criticised here and there for different bits perhaps last season, but he's integral to how that system works and how the back four is protected with him in front of them. And that's no slight on the players that were in there yesterday. But Ampadu just does the job so well. And to say that you expected Gruev to come in, like I put a comment in the group chat that I didn't want Gruev in there. I wanted Longstaff because watching Gruev turn like a tractor to get it onto his left foot it's painful to watch. And I mentioned this last year as well, and I don't know if people have picked up on it at all, but he doesn't seem to know he has a right foot. Now, like the joke goes, oh, you've got no right foot, have you not? No, it's just for standing on. It's literally it is Gruev. It is just for standing on. He cannot, like, if you watch highlights, you'll see every time he gets on the ball, he has to turn whatever way it is so he can get it onto his left foot. I don't think I saw him pass it once with his right yesterday. If anyone can correct me, happy days. But I don't think I saw one pass with his right foot yesterday. And if it was a clearance, a hoofed clearance out of the box.
And that just makes it so easy to play against because you know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's predictable. And I think that's why Longstaff would have suited better, because I think he's a little bit more two-footed than Gruev, but he's also got the Premier League head on him to be able to look at situations and go, right, we can't actually do that here, so we need to be more patient. Like when Gruev lost the ball to Rice for, I think their second goal, where Saka absolutely rifled it into the roof of the net. Like, I don't think Longstaff loses it there. I think Longstaff is stronger on the ball, and he's probably going to give himself more time because he can use either foot. You know, Gruev instantly had to get onto the left, and once he had to do that, they knew what to do. They put in one foot in, and he got the ball taken off him.
Yeah. I think that's true. I don't want to demonize one player, because I think
no, I'm not.
You don't master. Yeah, no, I know you're not. But just to make the point, I think you know, Gruev's never played at this level before, and I think there's a realism to that. We can't. Forest aside, I've never seen anybody. And let's be fair, Forest were absolutely woeful in that first season they stayed up. But them aside, you know, I've never seen anybody go out and sign a new first 11 and whatever else, which they absolutely had to do because they had so many on loan and at the end of their contracts that they did need to do an element of that. All right, they went a little bit far in the end and couldn't even register the players that they'd signed. But you know, there's an element of realism needed. We have signed a few players. We know that we need more. Okafor, I think we're hoping will carry an additional threat up front. I still think that we need, you know, I know we've signed DCL, but there's lots of question marks over what his availability be over the course of the season, and whether Metcha's got the athleticism but not the finishing. You know, we don't know. It'll be a watching brief, but I still think that we need goals. So somebody that can come in and get the goals. So I think, you know, if you, I know that we're linked with quite decent players across Europe, but whether that actually happens or not, that's another matter. But going back to midfield and the point around Gruev, I think you only need to look at Man City. You know, they lost their talismanic midfielder, and you look at the season that they had last season when they were out for the season. You know, only one player out of that side, and you think of the amount of money that they've spent on that team and that overall squad. You know, it's ludicrous the amount of money that they've spent, and it's still affected them that much. That's how important your midfield is in the Premier League, because it sets you up for success or failure. If you can get a foothold in midfield and you can impress your game through that, then you've got a fighting chance. So I don't want to demonize Gruev too much, but I just and there has to be a realism aspect. You can't just go out and sign an entire new squad on promotion and just expect it to work right from the off. But at the same time, we can see that come the end of the season, there are certain players that just won't be in the running. Pirot will be an interesting one because I think a lot of people expect him to get goals this season. I'm one of them. I think he'll get into double figures. In which case, if he does, I think he'll still be around next season. But there are others like Gruev that probably just aren't at the level, and I think that we'll probably see that across the course of the season.
Yeah, it's just one of them. It's like, again, you made the point about Gruev, and I'm not slating one particular player. I'm going to get on to another one just in a few minutes, but he'll suit other games better than he would have suited the game last night. The way he plays and how he likes to distribute the ball. He'll come up against the likes of Burnley, Sunderland, like I said, Wolves, Everton, West Ham. his style of play might be more suited to games against teams like that, where in the Arsenal game you needed that bit more experience in there. You needed the likes of Longstaff. I just want to touch on one more before we move on away from the team selection. What did you make of Perry's performance? There's a lot of people on Twitter I noticed were nearly clamoring for Meslier back, which is probably the biggest overreaction of the day.
Yeah, let's not do the baby out with the bathwater. I think I think there is a level of naivety again. Premier League is a different class, and not only is Premier League different class, but Arsenal and Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City, the ability that they've got to be self-assured enough. There were a couple of comments about us not pressuring their keeper. The problem with us pressuring their keeper is it leaves a man free somewhere, and they would have exploited that really quite quickly. But I think from that sort of perspective, there were a couple of times I'm looking at like the second goal from a corner that we conceded, and you're thinking, can he do a little bit more there? There was a big press of bodies, but can he do a bit more there? And I think he probably can. So that's a learning aspect. But I think one of the biggest issues was distribution, and that's not all down to Perry. The fact he needs to have people available that want the ball, and I think Ampadu being that link in midfield, that's another place he makes a big difference, and he will receive it on his left or his right. You spoke about how one-sided, how one-footed Gruev is, but he also, I don't think he would ever necessarily be 100% comfortable receiving the ball into that position, whereas Ampadu's looking for that all the time. He drops into the centre backs in the same fashion, but he doesn't give the same assurance, and he certainly doesn't have the passing range that Ampadu does. If we consider where Bogle got booked, I felt a little bit sorry for Bogle on that one. It was a daft challenge, but he'd been really put in the mire by his teammate, and then he did get booked, and that then puts question marks over, playing against any Premier League winger. You don't want to get booked inside the first 10 minutes. So then you've always got that in the back of your mind. If you're booked late in the game, it might go wrong and whatever else. But if you're booked, I think it were 8 or 9 minutes in, and then you've got the question mark. What you don't want to do is get something wrong after 40 minutes when you're already under the cosh, and then your teammates have got to spend the rest of the time playing 10 men. So I think when we're in that situation there, I felt that there wasn't much for him to hit, but very early on, I mean, I moaned in one of our group chats that what we were actually doing was knocking it long for Pirot to go and try and physically dominate Gabriel and Saliba, which just isn't going to happen. They're going to eat that up all day. But when their centre-backs are so good, and when our wingers are being marked, and when in midfield we've not really got people showing for it, what do? You knock it long, and it's attack and defend. I feel for Perry to a certain extent that he was in a position where it was really difficult for him to try to hit anybody. So I think as an overall, that needs to be addressed. However that's addressed, I don't think it's down to the individual in net and what have you. We need to make sure that there's people showing for him and people available. And I think if we, look at Newcastle next, you try and knock it long, even if it's Mecha, who does look more of a handful and look better in the air than Pirot, who often doesn't even jump, to my great frustration. Dan Burn will eat that up all day, no problem. So we need to find an answer to that.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. Like I think one of the things that kind of griped me yesterday was we got stung, I think, from the first time we tried to play it out from the back. And for me personally, I think that's where it should have ended. Gorkias nearly scored his first goal because of something of a mess up from playing out from the back. Now, I don't blame the players for that. That's obviously something Farke wants them to do. But I feel like when you get stung that badly once, where their main striker nearly scores, I think at that point you reassess how the hell you're going to try get, like, We needed the ball away from our goal as much as humanly possible. And playing it out from the back wasn't the way to do it. I think if you're going to have a player like Strike playing it to Perry, Perry needs to be gone. Like the minute it gets to his feet, don't be looking for a pass. Look for Nontor James out the wings. Hope to God that we can get a touch somewhere in along the lines. It can break kindly for us and go that way about it. Now, we're not going to play teams like Arsenal every week. We know this.
Yeah.
And I think a lot can be taken into account, like you said, with City losing De Bruyne last year. They lost by the same scoreline against Arsenal. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
like when you look at that kind of thing, you look at it and you go, well, City lost 5-0 there. So, by the laws of whatever universe you're into, surely we should have got hammered by double figures, perhaps, because we're not City. You know, that
Well,
kind of way.
yeah. I mean,
I'm not
first
saying
off,
it's.
it wasn't De Bruyne I was talking about with Rodri, but
Rodri.
it's the same. Yeah, it's the same point. I think. Yeah, I mentioned Forest earlier, and I've not fact checked this, so it's on Joe Wayman's head if it's wrong. But I saw a comment from Joe earlier that was the season Forest stayed up, they got battered 5-0 from Arsenal and 6-0 from Man City, and still stayed up. Yeah, those are our battles.
Yeah.
I mentioned before the sides that we need to be not bullied by, and we need to stand up against, and we need to be beating. Everton, we've already done. We've got Wolves, Brentford, Burnley, Sunderland. Those are the sides that we expect to be in and around us, and those are the sides. So there's about 6 sides that we need to be better than. I think if Ampadu is back, Ampadu seems to be a bit like Calvin Phillips was, in that when he's back, he's just back. We saw Solomon last season, that when he came back into the side after his injury, it took him 5 or 6. After 5 or 6 games, he was flying. I'm not digging him out at all. But it took him quite a few games to get back up to speed again. Ampadu seems to be a bit like Calvin in that if he's available, he plays his game and he's able to do that. So hopefully, if he's back after the international break as expected, then we'll be in a better position. I think the concern is it ends up being the Strike injury from 2 seasons ago, where it was, he'll be out for 6 weeks, and it was, actually it's another 6 weeks, and then before you know it, half of the season's gone. Strike being out at that time wasn't necessarily the worst thing, but Ampadu out for that amount of time would be a massive blow to us.
Yeah, I agree with you on what you're saying about Ampadu. Do you think, just to touch on real quick, do you think is it because he's his intelligence as a footballer is nearly far and above what we generally have, and that's why he's able to get back into it so quickly? He doesn't let the fact that he's been out injured hold him back. He's intelligent enough to know how to deal with it on the pitch.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of that, but there's also he's just, he's got a level of ability, and I think he's self-assured in his passing capability and being able to cope with being pressured with the ball at his feet. But I also think he's the shithouse that we miss when we don't have him. Much like we miss Click for that reason. I'd say he's a bit more of a leader than Click, but you need to have that guile, that bit of shithousery, that bit of Arsenal are shrinking violets when it comes to the dark arts either. They were pushing and pulling our players around, and I'm not saying that they were necessarily in breach of the laws of the game and what have you, but they know how to play and they know that dark art bit. So not only are they good and strong and quick and want the ball and play with confidence, but they're also able to mix it and do that other bit as well. And I think from our standpoint, potentially a little bit of naivety there, in as much as we've come from a position where we were the big fish in a small pond, not just a big fish, but the big fish in a small pond, and able to go and do whatever it was that we wanted to do in the game, and we would dominate largely pretty much every single opposition we came up against, certainly in the league. So I think that is a big learning curve, and I think it's not necessarily bad timing Because not only have we got the cup next, in which either we can bring additional players in, there can't be any complaints about anybody being dropped, because I don't think there were anybody that played particularly well.
Yeah.
So anybody being dropped can go, do you know what? Fair play. I didn't play well against Arsenal. And that allows us to make changes like be all in for Strike, potentially, like Longstaff in for Gruev in the middle, like Nemecha up front for Pirro. And he might get 60, 70 minutes and then Pirro come on. And actually, that is what a lot of people are saying is that the right dynamic, that you have the athleticism, the closing down, the aerial ability of Nemecha for 60, 70 minutes, and then you bring Pirro on with an additional layer of goal threat. I think the only downside to that is at that point you're also bringing Aronson on, which erodes your goal threat. So I think that there's an aspect there of I'm not going to get into that, but it is again. But now we've got Okafor as well. You're not necessarily in that same position. So I think you need to carry your own threat while being strong enough yourself. And I think that there is that element. I mentioned about Man City and Rodri. Taking one player out of that should not have had the impact on their season last season that it did. Yeah. So for us, we're in even worse a position when we lose our club captain that makes us tick, but also the one that's got that bit of dark art, got that bit. There's no two ways about it in my mind. Arsenal bring on a 15-year-old against a side in which Ampadu's playing, and he goes through him.
Oh, he absolutely takes him out.
Yeah, and I genuinely think that's what should have been done.
Yeah.
Not going to hurt him. Absolutely not. He's a schoolboy. I'm not saying that. But you go in hard and fair and make sure he knows he's in a game. And if he stands up to that fair, I thought the Goodmanson one, especially when he got booked, I was fuming at, because that would have fallen on Goodmanson.
That I was just about to touch on that. That was the kind of tackle that you're saying, fair but hard. And he there was nothing about it that was in any way a foul. Like, absolutely nothing. And I think he got more. I think he got booked more for dissent than he did for the actual tackle. Like, so.
Yeah, but
and he was right to feel aggrieved
when somebody's got it so bad.
yeah. And the linesman not even 5 yards away from it, and he still didn't, go here. That's not a free kick. Like, you know what I mean? So those kind of things. Yeah, I get what you're saying about the young fella, and he did get that, but again, I don't know where the ref got a free kick from in that one. We'll move on from.
It does look good though. That has to be said. He's got his GCSEs next year. It's ludicrous.
Didn't we have Harry Gray at that scenario as well, and Archie as well? So if we're going singing, he's got his GCSEs next year, you'll never sing that. Well, we can sing it as well, like, so don't worry about it. So we'll move on a bit now. I just want to touch on the one proper chance that we had to potentially go 1-0 up and then put 11 men behind the ball and make them work for it was the Pascal header. Fabulous save from the keeper, but a fabulous header from Pascal as well, considering the amount of people around him to get such a good header on it. Either side of the keeper, I think it's 1-0, but it was just unfortunate that the power he generated behind it didn't give him the opportunity to put it in either corner. I think it was just a pure, I'm putting me loaf on this and we'll see what happens. But a great save from the keeper at the end of the day. Like, you can see why he's there number one and rated very highly.
Ray is a really good keeper. I think the only negative I can say about him is it's dead weird him having Stewie Dallas's teeth in a different face. But yeah, he is a good keeper. I think you're right. It was one of those headers where actually, if he doesn't catch it quite as sweet, it probably flies into one of the corners. But he caught it absolute flush, and you can't knock him for that, because that's exactly what we're trying to do. And he really did catch it well. It was a good save, but you'd expect any Premier League keeper to save that straight at him in that way. But I think that's probably the biggest part of Strike's game, isn't it? It carries a goal threat from set pieces that we don't necessarily. Rodon, I think, has only scored one, maybe two goals. Ampadu's only scored a couple. I think he carries a goal threat. Largely, when we got the penalty against Everton, a lot of people were looking around going, who takes it? Pirot's gone off. And a lot of the answer in the stands, certainly around me, was Striker will have it. Now, when Emecha stood up, dispatched it very, very well. But, Gyökeres, I don't know if you saw his record. I think he's taken 28 and scored 27. So we can't be too critical of conceding the penalty against a record like that. That's incredible. Ivan Toney and Alan Shearer, I think, were very, very good with penalties.
Toney was 28 out of 28, wasn't he?
I think he missed one in his 30s, didn't he? Which is just a ludicrous level of ability and confidence on that. I think on balance, I think it's a fair point, but at the end of the day, it were a poor day at the office for us and a pretty good one for them.
Yeah.
As soon as you're 2-0 down against them, if you do,
you're never coming back.
Here's a question for you: Would you have taken 5-0 offered at half time if you were offered it at 2-0 down?
I'd have probably taken it based off the fact that they scored quite easily with Saka just before half time. Because you knew then at that point when Gruev lost the ball, and it was just a very, very simple ball where Goodmanson lost Saka. I thought, anything less than 5, I'd be happy with. Anything over 5, and I think it's shit your pants time. But look, like we mentioned, I think it's important to look at how Arsenal have played previously against other teams in seasons gone by, and they've only developed as to become a better team over the course of the last 2-3 seasons, where they've come very close to the Premier League, but they just haven't had that final bit. And maybe Gyökeres for them is the final piece in the puzzle, where they might be more considered title contenders this year than, as Deb says it in the comments, second again, ole ole. So maybe it's something that we need to kind of just take a step back and just go, everyone knows it. Everyone knows we need to beat the teams around us. That's important. But I think the hype of playing the bigger teams potentially gets to people sometimes, and the realization that if we get a point here, we're lucky, needs to set in more than, oh God, we lost 5-0. As long as we don't get spanked 5-0 again, that game won't even be remembered. That's the way I've been looking at it.
Yeah, we've had horrendous results before, and Saints have been beat 9-0 twice. I think it's that. I think at 2-0 down, you're thinking, well, if we get the next one, then there's still maybe a level of interest in the game. But they scored on 48 minutes, 3 minutes after the restart, and you're thinking, fucking hell, this could be double figures. Because as soon as a side like that gets the wind behind them and knows that the game's largely done, because we weren't carrying a threat as it was, and then there were three in front, you're thinking, fuck it, if they get their heads down and just carry on like this could end up, they could run in a cricket score. And that was really my concern, is if we get a hiding that is a historical level of hiding, not only will the players' heads be down, confidence be an issue, and all of at 5-0, it's a bad result. But it's a bad result, and it goes out of your mind, and you focus on the next one. I think the cup is a good time for us, and then go into the Newcastle game. But I don't think it's the hiding that anybody feared is getting, and I think that's the point.
Yeah. I just want to touch on something here before we move on. Michael Gotts in the comments here. Do you think their penalty was a penalty? The way I look at that is, yes. Regardless of whether he stood on just his toenail or whatever, we saw what happened with us last week against Everton. We know what VAR is like. And I think if you're not eating humble pie after that penalty, then you need to sit down and bake one, because I did think it was a penalty. If we got the penalty last week, at least the consistency was there. There was fuck all in it, and the ref still gave it. So if the consistency for fuck all there and still giving it, then I think we just have to kind of look at it and be like, look, we got one last week that got us our first 3 points. They got one yesterday that ended the game 5-0. Swings and roundabouts. It was a penalty in my eyes, if I'm being honest. But I think other people will have a different opinion, perhaps.
One of them sat right here. I don't think it was a penalty. I think if that is not given on the field, VAR doesn't go, oh, it's definitely a penalty. So I think that's one of fine margins, and I don't think that standing on somebody's toenail should represent a foul. I think if the threshold shouldn't be different. A foul's a foul, inside the box, outside the box, it shouldn't matter. And I think if that happens anywhere else on the field, it's not given as a free kick. In which case, I don't think it should be given as a penalty. But yeah, once it is given, there is contact, and therefore VAR is not going to overturn it. So I wasn't sat there hoping. I was sat there going, just get on with it. We know it's a pen, because it's already been given. But ultimately, it didn't change the outcome of the game. And I think it actually showed a level of respect that Gyökeres took it rather than the lad.
Yeah.
Downey or whatever his name was. I can't remember his name, the 15-year-old, which would have really taken the piss. In fact, is it Dawson? Something like that. Not too far away.
Dowdy or something.
Dowman. So I think, when it comes to that, I can't criticise Arsenal for anything, really. I thought that showed a level of respect for the league and for us as opposition. It was their main man that stepped up and took it. I just think, on that basis, I don't think it was a penalty. And in actual fact, talking about the handball from last week, I think there could have been a handball given in the second goal that Timber scored. I can't remember if it was Gabriel or Saliba, but one of their centre halves, it hit his hand, bounced down, and then was tapped into the net. So, but again, while it's fine margins, even if you take them two away, it was still 3-0, and they were far, far better than we were. So, I'd rather it went against us in this game that's already gone than it go against us in your Evertons, and we only come away from 1 point from the first 2 games instead of 3.
Yeah. Thing is, as well, though, with the way we got the penalty last week, it was always going to level itself out at some point over the season that we would have had that controversial penalty given against us. And I'm just glad it came against Arsenal because, at least it's, the Everton fans can stop bitching and moaning. We had one that was, and now they can just, they'll have to find something else to fucking moan about, which, they've plenty that they can find out about. They're from Liverpool for starters. And they've just they sold their soul for a new shithole toilet bowl. Yeah. There's not an awful lot more that we need to go through. I think we've dissected. Woo! The only person that can get away with going woo was Ric Flair, and that was it. The only person who could get away with that, Ric Flair, not the Everton fans. I think we've digested and talked enough about that. Do you have anything else that you potentially want to talk about in relation to the game? How do you feel the referee's performance was?
So
it was the Aussie ref, by the way.
Yeah. So on the ref, on the whole, I thought all right, quite poor, but no, not significantly worse than many others that we'll see across the course of the season. I hate the Premier League. I hate modern football and what it's become. No, I don't hate the Premier League. That's wrong. The Premier League is fantastic with brilliant athletes and brilliant capabilities. I mean, you look at the Saka finish and you're thinking, that is incredible. Yeah. But what I don't like is, and actually it remains to be seen as to whether the changes around the keepers will improve things. I think that the game against Everton would have been very different last season on principle of the 8-second rule and that sort of thing. So as long as that remains consistent throughout the course of the season, and that sort of thing. You know, Pickford not being able to waste time in the same way that he was, and that sort of thing. So I think, you know, if I'm scoring the ref, I'm giving him a 4.5 or a 5, which is a poor score really. But probably won't be massively beaten by many performances by the refs across the course of the season. But yeah, just as a, you know, I think we all said the journey to the Premier League is better than the destination. We know we're in for a long, hard season. We know that we're going to be scraping together points, and we're going to come up against sides that have got literally billion pound squads, and on a fairly regular basis. So, you know, we have to have we've got to look at the season through a realism aspect. And just the one point I was going to make before you asked me about the ref was, a great man once told us not to get too high with victories and not to get too low with defeats. And I think that that's something that we learned during his tenure with us, and that we need to bear that in mind, because if you have a meltdown with every single defeat, then we're going to have a shit season. Let's just enjoy being here.
Yeah. Well, like last year, when Ipswich went up and they were all like, rah, and they were giving it all that and everything, and we were like, lads, we told you the journey is better than the actual destination. And I think we need to sit there and listen to our own words, like you've just said, Gilly, and enjoy the wins when they come, and don't let the losses define you, and just go from there, innit?
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, I just have a pint. Look forward to the next game.
Have a pint. Yeah. I like that, man. Yeah. Just have a pint and look forward to the next game, sure. But, you know, either way, it's happening, lads. We're grand. Yeah. So what's the crack for during the week? I think
Do you want to go through the comments? Because you've started a couple.
Yeah, of course, man. I was just going to ask before I did, but we'll go through a few here. Let's start at the top. Liam B. Fark put out a championship team against one of the best Premier League teams. Yeah, we touched on that, Liam. We were talking about how his loyalty needs to kind of be put to one side for the betterment of the whole team and club, I think, sometimes. But what are you going to do? I think, like Gilly mentioned earlier, do you change a winning team? Or do you just, you know, implore different tactics with the same team? You know, it's a difficult one, I think. What do you think for Liam there?
It is, yeah. It's. I mean, if you look at the lineup, we did have far more players from the Championship than we had signed over the course of the summer. But I thought Strike played well against Everton, like I said earlier in the pod. So it would be really difficult to drop him. Didn't really have a choice on not having Ampadu, but then Ampadu would have been the players that played in the Championship, and he's one of the first names on the team sheet, as is Rodon, as is Bogle. So, you know, there is something fair to be said there. But, you know, you can't start Okafor without him having some element of getting up to speed. Nonto and James, maybe James not so much, but Nonto and James played all right against Everton. So I think it would have been really difficult to make wholesale changes off the back of picking up your first win in your first game. So, yes, that is true. We did put out a team larger from the Championship against one of the best Premier League teams. That wasn't necessarily the worst thing to do, and I don't think it would have materially changed the balance of the game, bringing Bornau or Be All In, or, you know, Longstaff's the one that we've said differently about, and maybe Metro would have made a bit more of a difference, but very, very fine margins.
Yeah, very fine. Bryn is here in the comments again. Goals were 2 zonally marked set pieces, a piss poor pass from Gruev, under 11 defending from Strike, and a horrendous VAR call.
So really, it should have been a draw. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's what he's getting at there, yeah. Or only 2-0 by the sounds of it. Thanks, Brent. I've got Michael Gotts here. How are you, Michael? When we brought in new players, I thought, ooh, yes, we can challenge a little here. I was excited. Yesterday showed what we need to do and the massive gap between us and the top teams. It's a very good point Michael makes. I think perhaps as a fan base, we probably got a little too ahead of ourselves in relation to the amount of players we were bringing in. But to say that we can challenge a little here is, I think that's very optimistic thinking. Like I said in a group chat yesterday, someone asked me what I thought the score was. I said, Heart says 2-1 Leeds. Hez says you're fucking mental. So I think we just need to have like that. I think that's a dose of reality right there for us, and I think it'll be a dose of reality for Fark and the board. And hopefully, going off what you were saying earlier, Gilly, that they're looking to bring in maybe 2 more, potentially a striker, and just see how we get on. I think it's important to know that we need to beat the teams around us rather than going hell for leather and ruining our entire season by getting hockeyed again 5 or 6-0.
Let's be fair. Newcastle are capable of doing that. You look at their midfield and their attack, and they've got that level of ability. But just look around the other results yesterday. Villa got beat off Brentford. Now I expect Brentford to be shit because Keith Andrews doesn't know what he's talking about. But so that all right, I'll be at Brentford, but still, you expect Villa to go there and get a result, and they were far better than Brentford were. But the points are the points. But you look at West Ham. West Ham have had Premier League money for multiple seasons that we haven't had, and they got hammered 5-1.
Yeah,
so
at home.
Yeah, Man City are wanting to go and win the title, and Spurs finished just outside the relegation places. Spurs went and beat them. So there's an element of actually you come up against sides in this league, and sometimes you're just going to get tonked whatever you do. Sometimes you're just going to get beat. Sunderland will be licking their wounds today because they got beat off Burnley. And I think that Sunderland, having made all the signings that they have and all of that sort of stuff, we're looking at Burnley thinking, we're definitely going to be better than you. We need to try and be better than Leeds. And we need West Ham, Everton, Wolves, Brentford. We need another one to fall into that bottom three, much as we're thinking like in the same respect. So they'll be licking their wounds because that was a big defeat for Sunderland. Albeit only 2-0, but they would have hoped to go out and beat Burnley. So I think that there definitely needs to be a dose of realism with these results.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people will start to realise that now after this. And like you saw yesterday, like you said, Spurs finishing 17th last year and then beating City 2-0 at the Etihad. I think there's going to be a bedding in period for a lot of teams, regardless of the level that they're at, because Spurs aren't clearly going to be as bad as they were last season. So there's going to be a little bit more. There's going to be a few cagey games, I think, from the top teams when they're playing each other as well. It's not going to be as straightforward as people are kind of letting on at the moment, We've Debs here as well. Didn't expect anything, but would have preferred to keep it 2-3-0. I think there would have been a lot in the same boat as Debs there yesterday, but for the sake of 2 or 3-0, and then for it to be another 2 on top, it is what it is. I think 2 or 3-0 may as well be 4 or 5-0 when you're losing to the likes of Arsenal. I think at that stage, especially at the Emirates,
Yeah, absolutely, and I think they are very, very capable of doing that to sides, and we're far from the only team that will get that sort of result at the Emirates this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Bryn is in the comments again here. To be honest, I'm happy. In a way, it's a hammering quickly, shows Fark some of his previous favourites are now not up to the pace of the Premier League. Pirro, Strike, Gruev can't start games and need to come from the bench at best. We did touch on that in relation to potentially all 3 of them. We know Bryn's opinion on all 3 of them anyway. He's made it very clear in group chats and stuff like that. But again, depends on who we bring in as a striker. Do we bring in another striker that could potentially start ahead of Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Nmecha and Pirro? We don't know yet.
And do you know what? That's going to take a big outlay to be able to land. But that's the scenario, isn't it? If they want to make a difference to the starting lineup, then they're going to have to bring in somebody that's better than those. And if that's what they go and do, fair play. It's a watching brief. It's one of those where it would have been really nice to do it before the season started, not just before the end of the transfer window. But that's the only bit.
Swings and roundabouts, really, isn't it? I think if that they haven't spent massive amount of money on one particular player, and I think that's probably going to be spent on a striker. If I'm honest, they're looking at that lad from is it Stuttgart? I'm not even going to pretend to try and pronounce his name. I think Bryn mentioned.
I saw there were a link to
Diri Mirovic or something like that.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, we'd been linking with him for a little bit, and the one that I saw yesterday was 35 million euros for a player in France. Can't remember who.
Oh, Bacchio or something like that. Was it Bacca or something along that line?
I remembered Bacca, the elk.
Yeah.
But,
you know what I'm like with butchering names. I probably have the spelling right, but the name absolutely butchered. Bacqua. So I was close. It was close.
Yeah.
A bit worrying from Skip here. He's saying, has anyone heard these rumors about Tanaka having an injury? I haven't heard anything now. What
I think somebody mentioned that when they had a player down for a little bit, he went and had a little bit of treatment at the sidelines.
Right.
So yeah, it just depends on. It's just a watching brief on that, isn't it? But if we lost him and Ampadu,
yeah, that's
big loss.
That's a heavy one. That is a heavy one if that happens. I like Herbert's way of looking at things here. How are you, Herbert? You don't walk into Disneyland and put on a Mickey Mouse suit on your first day. You do a couple of years handing out flyers dressed as a tomato. You know, there used to be that ad on TV for the bank. Do you remember when the little kid was like, "Oh, I want to be a tomato"? So maybe that's where Herbert's just been walking down memory lane watching old school 90s adverts on TV or something.
Was that somebody else then said, "I want to be a tree," and then we want to be together? Was it that?
Yeah.
Nashville, it might have been.
I'll find it and I'll send it to you. I'm not sure if it's Santander or something like that.
That's the right memory. I'm having that.
yeah. Oh, want to be a tomato. Well, you are. Andrew McCoy says Newcastle midfield. I'm not quite sure. Did you start this one or?
I did, yeah. I spoke about it just as we were maybe lining up the next game is something that we should be doing on the main pod. But
yeah,
I think if you look at their capabilities in midfield, Harvey Barnes and so on separately, but Tonali and Joe Linton and Bruno, that's a good midfield, and so I think just in that respect, if we don't have Tanaka and we don't have Ampadu, then we're really going to be under the gun. So I'm really hoping that that Tanaka's available and that we can bring Longstaff in. It'd be really nice if Longstaff had the one that popped up with a goal, wouldn't it?
I was just going to say that. Yeah. You literally done a J on me there. I was going to say that. Like it'd be nice to bring Longstaff in for that, but we'll get into that more on the main pod on either Tuesday or Wednesday, depending. We have the voice of reason coming towards the last few chats. Jay, our Jay, I'd rather lose 5-0 to Arsenal than 2-0 to Burnley. Now 100%. that's fairly insightful. That now and for a man who loses his entire shit at the best of times, I think that is probably the most reasonable way of looking at it.
Bear in mind that's today, though, not yesterday. We don't know what position he was in yesterday.
Oh, that is very true.
He would have probably been in the middle of the Twitter meltdown. But my missus also pointed out: would you rather? I mean, it was at 4-0, not at 5-0. But would you rather go to London and lose 4-0 to Arsenal, or go to London and lose 4-0 to QPR, as we did 2 seasons ago?
I know what I prefer.
Yeah,
I know what I prefer.
So.
Being in the Premier League and that happening. And finally, we have our other pod contributor, Simon Johnson. How are you getting on, Simon? Personally, I'm not reading too much into yesterday's results. Arsenal can do that to literally any team in the league on their day. Granted, some of the goals were sloppy, but I remain optimistic. And if you take anything from this pod, it's take that. Take what he said there. Take it on board and just be like, look, we can be as optimistic as we want, but we're never going to go to Arsenal this season and get any kind of result. It was always going to be limit the goal difference. And I think we've done as well as City did last year. So it's the way I look at it.
Quite.
But yeah, thanks for that, Simon. Gilly, have you got anything else that you'd maybe like to cover before we finish up?
No, nothing major. Just I am going to mention something now because we're allowed to break cover on it because it's gone out on the socials. But Luke and I and a few of the podcast friends have been lucky enough to be involved in a new app that's coming soon. So it's in its testing phases at the moment. It's called Fanalytics, and basically it is a platform there that fans can get involved, and you only talk about your own team. You register yourself as a fan of a particular team, and you get to interact with your own fans rather than it being the cesspit meltdown place that Twitter can be at times. So keep an eye out for that, because we get to talk some shit on there as well. On there, you have to give a prediction, and I went 3-0. And I thought, do you know what? I'll take that before kick-off, because I was a little bit worried about it.
Yeah. Well, look, sure, that's what you're doing it for, man, just to give your honest predictions, and that's as honest as it gets, I guess, Gilly, thanks very much for coming on board this morning. I know you're probably got a lot of stuff going on now for the afternoon.
Thank you for you as well, because I just want to point out that Smarty did the rotor for the first time. This is the first rotor I've not done. Smarty did do the rotor and wrote it himself on twice while he's in Lanzarote. So, yeah, fair play to Smarty, but thank you for stepping in, Karl.
Absolutely no bother whatsoever. Appreciate everyone in the comments as well. We don't have any Andy's Man Club updates just at present, but we will definitely be getting on to Lee to try and get those sorted out for future main pods and stuff like that. So keep your ear out for that. Anything like that, we'll also put on our socials so that you can all get on board with it. And again, just remember, keep your head happy, because you're there a lot of the time. And I know Leeds haven't helped this weekend, but, power through anyway. Gilly, thanks a million, man. We will catch you in the group chat then, yeah?
See you soon. Thanks all.
Bye-bye.